is cool. Okay. All right. Welcome back to 35 millimeter. I'm your host, Morgan Bluestein, and today we have a very special guest for you, Kevin Smith.
Why, hello, kids, and hello, Morgan. How are you,
I'm
my younger twin?
I'm doing good. How are you?
So damn good, man. It's taken a minute for us to hook up on a podcast, but dag nabbit, it happened. Here we are.
Yep, I've been talking about it for a while, and people have been like, "Is this gonna happen?" And I'm like, "Look, he's a
You
very important man."
get some shit from people. Yeah, right. People are like, bullshit, he ain't important. Did people give you like doubts and stuff? I remember when I was a
Yeah.
kid, I told my friend Ernie O'Donnell, who like I'm buying a movie theater, that Harrison Ford had written me a letter in crayon, because I thought the in crayon part would make it seem believable, more authentic, or something like that. And Ernie was like, he wasn't like super smart, but he was smart enough to fucking be like, that makes no sense. I think it's because I had read a story about like Elvis writing a fan a letter in crayon or something like that. So Ernie was like, well, can I see it? And I was like, yeah, I'll bring it in to school. And then finally one day I had to be like, no, I don't have a letter. Because he basically brought it up in front of Sam Holland. He was just like, where's that letter from Harrison Ford written in crayon, Kev? I had to be like, it didn't exist. It's like a fucking after school special, man. Like, which you don't know anything about. When we were kids, Morgan, they would do this thing since we didn't have cable and we didn't have streaming, and fuck, the internet was eons away. You would watch like whatever they gave you as a kid. And during the day, like, there was no 24-hour cartoon channel and shit. They do kids programming on Saturdays on the three networks. But generally speaking, during the day, they would do kids programming on like the two independent stations in the morning. And then I Love Lucy would take over at like 10 o'clock. And then after school from like 2 o'clock till 5 o'clock, they would run after school program, kids shows, fucking reruns of the Brady Bunch, Gilligan's Island, shit like that. So I don't even know why I'm telling this story. Why did I start telling this story?
Um, I don't know.
Now that's hosting, Morgan. That's keeping the guest on track. I'm trying to think why I was telling the story. We didn't have a lot to watch. What was my point in all this? Was it connected to Ernie still? Did this spring out of the Ernie thing?
Yeah.
Crayon letter. Yeah, but how did it all connect? Boy, in the beginning, it sure connected in my head. If it comes back to me, it will. But why did I tell that story? So watch TV in the afternoons and in the mornings. There wasn't a lot of programming. There was, yeah, I forget. I forget why I went on that fucking torrent, that rant. My apologies. Let that be a lesson to you, Morgan. Don't smoke weed. It's not good for you. Not good for your
Well,
story.
I got that Kevin Smith Club grinder and rolling tray upstairs.
You're gonna have to wait, what, 10 years to use that?
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. When I got it, I was like, "Mom, look what I got," and she's like, I was like, "Are you gonna take it away?" Or she's like, I was like, "Mom, where do you expect me to get weed from? You think I'm just gonna?" I was like, "My room is right next to the living room. You're gonna smell it if I even attempt it." She's like,
that
"Good point."
grinder is used for all sorts of things, not just weed.
Right,
For spices in the kitchen and stuff.
right. Okay, so obviously you have a new movie coming out, Clerks III.
Yeah.
Um, so what was it like being back at the Quick Stop with Jeff and Brian and everyone? Was that just like surreal for you?
It was very surreal, but at the same time, I planned it all. So it couldn't strike me as that surreal because I had manifested it. I'd
Right.
made it happen and stuff. So when it happened, I was like, yeah, this is what I thought it would be like. Very cool. It was trippy for everybody else because I'd had plenty of time, years to prepare for the moment that we were all going to be standing at Quick Stop again, doing very similar things to shit we did back in 1993. Some of the other cats, they were not prepared for it. So for them, it was very trippy. For me, it was just delightful. Like that whole experience of making the movie was just over and over again. Like, I thought this would work. I thought this would work. Like, boy, I thought this would work. And getting to work at Quick Stop without having to work at Quick Stop, so to speak, was fantastic because I didn't really hate Quick Stop as much as I just hated working, like waiting on the public. Store would close and we would sit around the store for like hours bullshitting. So it wasn't like I couldn't stand being there. I just liked it when it was closed and stuff. And really coming back to shoot the movie, we didn't have to shoot it at night. We got to shoot it all day long because we kind of bought them out for the run of the show. For the first time ever, like they let us buy them out. Usually the toppers are like, you can't close the store. You got to shoot around the store being open. So on Clerks II, when we went back to Quick Stop for the interior stuff, how we shot was we'd be shooting a scene and then we'd say cut, and then Mrs. Topper, who owns the store with Mr. Topper, she would open the front door, let in customers, wait on the customers while we got ready for the next take. And then when the last customer left, we'd lock the door and shoot another take, which is, kind of a pain in the ass, but whatever. It's their store. Those are their rules. In the age of COVID, we could not afford to do that. We had to keep very strict, tight, closed sets because anybody could just bring in the fucking virus and then suddenly we're shut down for a week. And if you shut down a Tom Cruise movie for a week, it's an inconvenience. Maybe you get yelled at by Tom Cruise, as we saw in the news and stuff. But if you shut down a Kevin Smith movie for a week, like it's seriously hampers production. We didn't have like a lot of money for production to begin with. And then the costs went up on top of it because of COVID precautions, something we'd never had to work with before when we made a movie. So, it was it was bliss for me. Proving you can go home again. And, for a piece of real estate that I've always had a very complicated relationship with, because when I left her, I just, didn't want to be there, anything but fucking working for a living and stuff. And oh my God, I got a career. I'm a filmmaker, done. And I went running. But as you can see, for 30 years, I keep going back over and over again. Like, it's the wellspring from which all blessings flow. I saw somebody on Twitter just now was like talking about Clerks III. They're like, hard pass. This guy's basically written one movie his whole.
I just saw that, and they were like, and you were like, so Tusk movie and Clerks movie is the same exact movie, and Dogma's the same exact movie, and I was like,
You notice I didn't put Yoga Hosers on that list though. I don't want him to be like that is like Clerks with girls, in a weird plot. But yeah, I feel like it's definitely one way to look at it, but I think it's like diminishing what I've been able to accomplish. It's not like, fucking when you make, 9 fucking Police Academy movies. Like Clerks 2 and Clerks 3 are, this kind of story that starts a trilogy that starts as like the story of a boy who wants to make a movie and ends as the story of a man who wants to make a movie, more or less.
yeah,
Yeah, so it's, I don't know, like every once in a while people talk shit and I'm like, oh, maybe I do suck. And then I remember it's like, man, you are in the midst of pulling off a fucking magic trick that maybe 8 directors in the world have ever fucking done. And yours is even weirder because it's the most unlikely and shit. Only thing kind of even close to this, Richard Linklater doing the before movies, Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and so forth. A trilogy in indie film. But you look at our humble origins, little black and white movie made in 1993, released in 1994. It does not make manifest like one day there's going to be fucking 3 of these and a whole universe attached to it. That was just me, like, that's what I wanted to do. That seemed fun to me. And years ago, people like that guy who tweeted, like, put me off of my universe by saying that over and over. Oh, he just keeps making the same fucking movie. And then I was like, all right, I guess I better stop. And I went and did other things. I don't regret that, but I love my characters. And that some jagoff could have ever put me off of my life's work, which is like telling stories with these characters. I wish I could have made 14 fucking Clerks movies and shit. But who knows if there's time, if there'll be time left to accomplish that. So, it's weird sometimes, when people come at you, you realize some people are just being shitty. But that dude genuinely seemed, like put off by my like body of work or something like that. In which case it's like, why are you even responding to this tweet? Then it becomes an act of random hostility where it's just like, nobody asked you. Like literally nobody. So you want to jump in the conversation, just be like, well, I'm not going there. It's like, well done. Noticed. Another
So
from. Yes.
so you were talking about how COVID expenses and a lot of things with Clerks 3. Your career started with a budget of $27,575, right, for Clerks?
That's right, Your Honor. Yes, counselor. That's correct.
And then for Clerks 3, you had a budget of 7 million.
Is that what they got? Is that what is reported?
That's what Google says.
Let me ask, hold on. You know what? I bet you I could beat Google. Let me ask Liz. That's something I stopped paying attention to a long time ago, Morgan. I spend responsibly, so it's not like, oh my God, I don't think about the budget because I'm wildly spending. But math is so not my strong suit. And I honestly don't know what things cost. My perspective is locked in 1994 when we made Clerks. So I'm always like, oh, you could do that for like $1,000. And people are like, what are you fucking nuts? So let me ask Liz. While in line, you meanwhile talk about something else, but I'm gonna ask her in real time right here, and we're gonna
Okay.
get the response. Go
So
ahead.
so I was I don't even know what I was gonna say. Um you're
I'm asking a bona fide Hollywood producer right now, a bona fide Hollywood question. Let's see. And she's generally a pretty fast texter. We'll see how fast she gets back, man.
so the film is inspired by you making Clerks and your heart attack. What
Yeah.
what was it like going like that meta? Was it weird seeing the characters you create do stuff that's happened to you?
What a great question. But think about it from this perspective, Morgan. From the jump, it's always been a meta experience to me because all the movies, like the Clerks movies, have been about my life. Particularly the first Clerks was literally a carbon copy of what my day looked like. And, I took a lot of shit that happened and compacted into one movie and then made up some shit that never happened and whatnot. But the dichotomy, the relationship, Dante and Randall, that existed in real life. So when I watch the movie, of course I see Brian and Jeff doing a wonderful job, but I also see, me and Brian Johnson as the origin point. So when it came to this iteration of Clerks 3, oddly enough, I was like, not like, this is fucking nuts, because it's always like that. I crib regularly from my real life. So every movie I watch is like watching a biopic on some level or another. Even Tusk, which is like the weirdest movie to point to, and people like, that was your biopic. But when I watch Tusk, aside from like, how fucking weird it is, that movie is mired in a
The
man,
podcast?
well, podcast, absolutely,
Yeah.
but a man who like was enamored of the sea, even though he lived in Winnipeg, about the furthest thing from the ocean you could get. And that reminded me of my father. My father's all over Tusk. He was so into nautical themes. He dreamed of a life on the ocean. We had a boat, a little Boston whaler at one point, got destroyed in a flood. Not a big one, just like something you go out fishing on. And you could tell like that would have been the thrust of his life if he could have lived it on the sea. Like that was, we lived right near the water, I think, for that very fucking reason. So all throughout Tusk are all these elements and themes and feelings that, like, as I watched the movie, they invoke my father, even though my father was not a guy that was like, I'm gonna cut your legs off and make you a walrus. But like even dopey shit like the toilet paper doll that like Wallace turns around in the bathroom, that comes straight out of my life and my childhood. Like I used to do that when I went into my grandmother's bathroom when I was a kid, and then our bathroom. My mom got one of those. My grandmother gave her one of those toilet paper covering dolls, and its creepy eyes always looking right at my dick when I stand there taking a whiz as a child. So I'd always turn it around self-consciously so I could take my whiz. So every movie that I've ever made, not even just the ones that steal very obviously, like in the case of Clerks 3, my heart attack is purloined absolutely for the plot. But every movie I watch kind of has that sprinkling of reality, so that when I watch them, I can dig them as little personal memory essays. An interesting point about having to make a Clerks 3, and I didn't have to, nobody had a fucking gun in my head, but like in saying like I'm gonna make a Clerks 3, you really have to go like, well, what is Clerks? And Clerks is a movie that I could not replicate to save my fucking life if I had to. You can only do that once, like that Daffy Duck cartoon when he drinks all the fucking TNT and the explosives, then fucking blows up, and Bugs is like, "Oh my god, Daffy, that was the best," and you got to do it again, and Daffy's rising up to heaven as a fucking ghost, and he's just like, "The problem is I can only do it once." Clerks is a fucking magic trick you could only pull off once, because Clerks manifested a life for me where I didn't fucking live Dante's life ever again. Dante and I were inextricably linked and seemed very much like the same person. Dante was very much based on me. So much so that when my mother watches the Clerks movie, she gets very emotional when the car just pulls up in front of Quick Stop, because that to her is part of her journey. She'd be like, she watched on Clerks 3, she'd start crying. I said, "Mom, the movie hasn't even started yet. Don't start fucking crying till the end." And she was just like, that was my life. I used to pull up to that store and drop you off for work all the time and stuff. And she did, not all the time, but a lot of the fucking time, Mom would drop me off to work. So that moment, which I've taken from what I feel is my life, is also kind of purloined from Mom's life, and so I couldn't do what I did on Clerks ever again because I don't work in retail. If I was ever going to try to make a real sequel to Clerks, like, fucking the idea of people that work in retail hell and ate fucking what we never called Karens, but were back then. I wouldn't even do it. There's that guy on Instagram who puts on the mustache. Maybe it is a real mustache, and he works at IKEA, and he'll do like the voice of a customer asking, a question, and he dramatically brings the camera in on himself, and the music comes in, and it's very dramatic music, and he dresses that person down even though they're not there, calls them an idiot and shit. It is the most Randall-esque thing I've ever seen in my life, and he gets it done in like a minute, whereas it took me 90 minutes on Clerks. So that to me is like, that's the modern day Clerks, a guy who's literally in the trenches, making a TikTok about fucking how people suck, about how this job sucks. So I couldn't do that because I'm no longer in the trenches. Now I own the trench. I'm not the guy who works for the boss in retail. I am the boss in some retail establishments. So I couldn't really do an authentic sequel to Clerks. Clerks is nothing if not authentic, right? Like, oh, it drips with authenticity. It was made in that store. It was made by a guy who was living that life and shit. Clerks 2 is complete artifice. I never worked at a fucking fast food joint. I never went to a donkey show. I didn't live the plot of that movie one iota or anything. Never danced on a roof, never played hockey on a fucking roof. Even that's made up. So by the time you get to Clerks 2, which is absolutely one of my favorite movies ever made, you got to remember it doesn't have the authenticity of a Clerks. It's got real emotion, and that's a movie that wears its heart on its sleeve, and that's what it has that Clerks doesn't. Clerks is earnest in what it is, but the boy who made that movie was still a little too afraid to show you his heart. By the time you get to Clerks 2, he's willing to wear his heart on his sleeve, and that's what gives that movie the edge and makes it different than Clerks and makes it a viable and honorable sequel. It doesn't try to be the movie that it comes from. It tries to be its own thing. By the time you get to Clerks 3, it's like, I really can't fucking do a movie about retail. It's been nearly 30 years since I worked behind a fucking counter. But what I could bring to it is the real in two other ways, the authenticity in two other ways. Just as Clerks was picked from the bones of my actual life at the time, Clerks 3 is picked from the bones of my life across 30 years. Number one, of course, it starts with the heart attack, which just happened recently, and becomes fuel for the film. Like, that's as real as fucking it gets in my life. That heart attack almost killed me. So having that in the movie gives the movie authenticity, more authenticity, I feel, than the second movie had. And again, I love Clerks too. That's not me putting it down. Then you add to it that the boys make a movie in Clerks 3, and that movie looks an awful lot like fucking Clerks. So that's me lending back my experience the same way in Clerks that I lent my daily experience behind the counter to the characters of Dante and Randall. Same thing here, lending my experience of like, oh, I made a movie in that convenience store once, so they should do it too. So what Clerks 3 lacks in the authenticity of a guy who is in the fucking trenches, man, fucking ringing up people and shit, waiting until 10:30 so he can fucking close the steel shutters and shit. That I'll never have again. I hope. I hope. Look, everything can go fucking south one day, and maybe I'll be back at a convenience store and shit. But it doesn't look likely at this point. So, knock wood, man. But it would. But to be fair, it wouldn't be the worst thing to happen to me. I love quick stuff. So since I can't deliver that aspect, that authentic aspect of the retail experience in a Clerks movie, I augment with authenticity from other parts of my life, which again is pretty much part and parcel for how I've made these movies each and every time. You know, Dante loves two girls in Clerks. He loves Veronica and he loves Caitlin. Both of those girls were based on my ex-girlfriend, my high school girlfriend, Kim Locker, and then went on to college and stuff. She was both the person that I was super comfortable with and who was always urging me forward, like, you could be doing a lot more than this, like, and also the person who I shared lots of history with, as Dante did with Caitlin. So, you know, with Clerks 3, I got to dollop in as much authenticity, as much from my real life as I did the first time around, which was wonderful because we shot the movie where we shot the first movie. And, you know, the second movie, if it has a degree of artifice to it, I'm okay with that by virtue of the fact that, like, it is a fairy tale. Like, you know, fucking, there's no way Rosario Dawson fucks Brian Hollard in this world unless somebody writes that into a script, for heaven's sake. So clearly there's a fantasy element involved there. But Clerks and Clerks, I love all three, don't get me wrong. But Clerks and Clerks 3 are fucking piled down with authenticity. They're as real as a dopey indie comedy could get.
So you were talking about how Clerks 3 and you pulled from some of your experiences there. Um and I
I
think
got an answer from Liz. What did you say the internet said?
7 million.
I'm not far away. Looks like 7 and change, close to 8. Closer to 8 though, I would say. When all's in, all, you know, basically the COVID cost is what jacked us up a little
Yeah.
bit. It was crazy.
So you're taking the movie on tour and going to almost all the states. What are you most excited with about that? You've done that with most of your recent movies, Jane Silent Bob, Strike Back, Red State was where it started. So what are you most excited with that?
I don't know if it'll be the exact same experience that we had on Jay and Silent Bob reboot, because that movie was just a fucking party, man. Like, start to finish, even though it has some touchy-feely parts in it. It was just hey man, come to my house. You haven't come to my house in like fucking 10 years. Come over to my house. We're gonna have a fucking kegger, smoke some weed. And everybody fucking came and it was just good times. I hope that Clerks 3 is received the same way, because for a majority of the movie, it is very much that. But it's also a movie that in its third act decides to do something a little different as well. So, you know, I'm hoping to God it's the same experience that I had on the Jay and Silent Bob Reboot Roadshow tour, where every night I went out on stage. I likened it to being in a church where I was both the priest and Jesus at the same time. I was the celebrant and I was being celebrated, man. There's a room full of people who overpaid to see a movie. So they were pretty inclined to like it, whether it sucked or not, man. And they were surrounded by a bunch of like-minded individuals. And right up front's the guy who made the thing telling them how it all came to pass. And then afterwards, we were all bullshitting together. So all of that is just was bliss, man. Like, yeah, I look back, we did 65 cities. Never even thought of it. Never, 65 is a lot. And I think this time around, we'll get to like 50 cities in a post-COVID world. And 50 cities is a lot, but the time just went by so quickly, man. It was so damn satisfying. And, there's nothing more satisfying, I'm sure, than when you open at the box office and it does well. I'm sure that's gratifying as well. For me, it's more gratifying to be in the room, in a sold out room with a bunch of like hardcore fans of everything that I've done who are, seeing the movie is fine, but it's talking about it afterwards is going to make the experience even sweeter. Watching it with all these folks that, like them, have made it such a big part of their lives for nearly 30 years. So, prior to doing the tours, only way you knew how you were doing with the world and whatnot, like maybe you'd have a public screening here or there or something like that, a promotional screening, I should say. But the public screenings were, just like any old movie, it opened up, and the story, if you went from theater to theater, you could kind of get a gauge on how things were doing. But generally speaking, the story was told on Monday with numbers. And numbers are nothing, Morgan, if not romantic. Everything about the movie business is romantic. Oh my God, here we are making art, for heaven's sakes, telling tales and stuff. One of the greatest businesses in the world, as they taught us in that Netflix movie Mank by Fincher. There's that wonderful line where he's like, I'm paraphrasing, but it's one of the only businesses where you sell the client something that they don't get to own, other than the memory of having watched it. Like, that's so fucking true. You're making magic. This ain't like building a fucking bridge. Even when we build bridges, they're made out of wood and fucking nails, and it goes down, in a rainstorm or some such shit. Just needs to look good for a few minutes while we shoot the shot. So, it's, for me, I don't get like the big major release, and I don't necessarily want it. I don't think I used to love making these movies and keeping them as cheap as I could. And then I got frustrated because, I'd keep the budget down and they put like tons of marketing money into it. Case in point, Clerks II. Labored like fuck to get everybody to like, take less. I took no fucking salary just so we could keep the budget to 5 million. And when Weinstein Company got it, they fucking spent like $20 million marketing the movie. And their philosophy was always like, let's take the gamble, man, that we get more people coming in. But I was like, who's going to jump on to a movie with a 2 in the title? Like, we should be catering to the people that like the first one. They're the ones that are going to fucking come back. And you don't need $20 million to hit those people. I hit them all the time on the internet. So, it got frustrating, and I pulled out of that world and stuff, and then started kind of doing this. And this is gratifying for me. I know sometimes it's frustrating for some of the audience I see on social media. People are just like, man, I just want to fucking be able to go see it when I want to see it in a fucking theater. Like, why does it have to be this complicated? Because that's the only way this movie gets to exist. Like, there ain't no studio clamoring to make this movie and then spend $20 million on top of it to get it onto a TV in front of you, just in case you might be watching that minute or something like that. It's just fool's play, man. Like, I ain't making a Marvel movie. This ain't fucking Star Wars or Harry Potter. So it's got an audience, don't get me wrong, and I'm appreciative for that, but I know what size that audience is. So it behooves me to kind of keep the budget tight and to keep the marketing as tight as fucking possible. Because when shit does well, think about this. Like, when we did the Reboot Roadshow tour, man, at a certain point, it's a couple cool, like Forbes, another place, wrote some cool articles about like, hey, they just broke a record that even the Avengers couldn't fucking break. hey, they fucking jumped onto the charts with this. You know, there's a guy on Forbes who's what's his name, Scott something, and I guess my existence irritates the fuck out of him because he writes about box office. Whenever he writes about limited release box office, he has to include me because with Red State, limited release means like, let's say, everything you gross, single best day gross. So let's say you're a Disney movie comes out, and this is back in the day, pre-pandemic. Pixar movie comes out, whole fucking world goes and stuff. And one theater somewhere in the country, or all of them together, but generally I think it's per screen. This is a per screen thing. So one theater is going to make the most, right? Like one of the biggest theaters in the country that has the most amount of seats and shit. If they sell every fucking seat, they're going to be the highest grossing fucking theater, single screening, and you go up on the top 10 list. It was all Disney movies and shit. Makes sense. Because of Red State, because we played at Radio City Music Hall, because of that single day gross, we popped up onto that top 10 chart. So it was like a bunch of Disney movies, and at number 9 was Red State. And so this dude, Scott, I forget his last name, at Forbes, like every time he has to write about that list, he does this aside about like, I have to include Kevin Smith, even though he rigs the system by overcharging for his movies and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, bitch, just give us the fucking credit. How about giving me credit for being clever? Never mind fucking like, oh, fucking, well, technically he's charging more money and shit. It's like, that's not what the thing says. It says highest single day grosses, top 10. We count, then shut the fuck up. Don't qualify. Don't bitch either. I don't care if you qualify, but every article the dude has to write about it, he's like, oh, and I have to include Kevin Smith's Red State. It's like, yeah, bitch, that's your job. You're writing about fucking box office records. We have one. I'm sorry. We have to be fucking included and shit. So being able to tour affords you the ability to do stuff like that because you're hyper concentrating the audience into places where, you can walk away with a single day gross that's Disney impressive or even Marvel impressive.
So we only got like 6 minutes left on this Zoom meeting. So let's do 2 more questions. So these ones my dad gave me. These are some stuff that he wanted to know and just some stuff he came up with. So
Okay.
I know you took your mom to Graceland a while ago, and then I caught a recent Wake and Bake where you played a few Elvis songs and were very moved. And I mean, obviously it's hard to see, but I got, big Elvis fan.
Did you like the movie? Did you like
Oh,
Boswell?
loved it.
Wasn't
Loved
it
it.
great?
I've seen it like so many times. It was
And
so
now
good.
it's available on home video, I think. Now you can stream it. Oh
Oh,
my
I
lord.
pre-ordered it.
It was a sumptuous affair. I mean, he's
Yeah.
always a off the charts wonderful filmmaker, but I thought Austin was amazing. Like it was, yeah, it was well done. It was a whole fuck ton of movie right there.
So, and one of the very few movies I pre-ordered, including yours. So, all your
Nice.
movies have been pre-ordered, beside
Thank
and
you.
Elvis.
Thank you. You make me feel like the king.
So, what are the top 3 Elvis songs that you would say are your favorite?
I can't help falling in love with you or can't help falling in love with you is honestly one of the most moving songs ever written. It's incredibly simple lyrically, and I'm sure he didn't write it. He was more of a singer than a songwriter, but lyrically, very very simple, but very powerful, very moving. No matter who it's sung by. But that being said, Elvis's rendition, that silky voice, the history, the nostalgia that comes with him when I started hearing it, naturally, it was years after he recorded it. I was born in 1970, so I probably became cognizant of the song because of my mother. I say circa 77 or something like that. So it's also tied in with my mom, so it tends to make me emotional as well. But I remember her singing it to my dad when I was a kid, and vice versa. So absolutely not just one of my favorite Elvis songs, but one of my favorite songs ever recorded. Um, in the Ghetto is an amazing song and showed like the development of an artist who'd been hidden for a long time and had things to say, wasn't just a Las Vegas lounge act or something like that. A revelation, and had a lot of heart in it as well. And from everything I've ever read, was Elvis um, feeling at that point in his life heard, as opposed to constantly being shoved into a movie or this or that or the other thing. He got to kind of be the artist he dreamed about being in that era, more so than just the artist he was kind of forced into being, both of which were great, but one of them probably made him more fulfilled. And then the third greatest Elvis song of all time, let's see. I mean, I should go something like Jailhouse Rock or Hound Dog or Teddy Bear, but I'm a very sentimental fool, Morgan. So I tend to go for the soft songs and the heartbreaking songs. But Viva Las Vegas is
Good
bars,
one.
man. I mean, it's the jam. It's so fucking fun. And whether you're trucking into Vegas, which I have many times with that fucking song playing, or whether you just hear it pop up. I got a list of 100 songs, 100 movies that we're going to be playing all the time in the Smodcastle Cinemas, my movie theater that we open up mid-September. And I DJ it kind of, but like one of the songs is Viva Las Vegas because it just fucking gets you
Yeah.
excited for sakes, man. And it's take everything else away, remove the Elvis of it all. It's just fucking it's hot. It's a great song.
When you get an off day, what is the movie that takes you to your happy place?
Generally, it tends to be a Marvel flick. Like that'll if I'm like kind of blue, I lean toward Marvel. I think. Yeah, that's the one more often than not. The run of movies. I don't even watch mine because by the time we get to the place that the movies are on home video, I've seen the movies a hundred times. I know the story inside and out because I wrote it myself. So I tend to look for things that like make me emotional, and Iron Man makes me
That's a
emotional.
good
Yeah,
one.
I'm a crybaby, and I don't mean like woohoo, but I mean like I love to fucking cry. I spend a lot of time trying to make people laugh and laughing and stuff like that. But the other end of the spectrum is just feeling. And so I don't love to cry and like, spank me and torture me and make me hurt. I love to feel like, especially art ties me back to my old man. I remember seeing him cry watching Raging Bull, and he's a grown ass adult, and I was a little kid, man. I was like 9, and I'm like, you could do that? You're allowed, like men are allowed to cry ever, let alone at a thing that's fucking fake. This ain't happening. He don't know this guy. Like that's Robert De Niro. And that'll train a motherfucker, man. That will open up the world to you. And some people I get made fun of online all the time for fucking crying. And people, the people the far right folks seem to think that like reminding me that I'm a crybaby is something that would bother me. But I'm like, I am so in touch with my fucking feelings. Like, there's nothing more gratifying than watching some dopey ass piece of art and getting so moved by it, so moved that you're moved to physical fucking tears. Iron Man in the cave with Jensen, where he's just like, "Don't waste your life, Stark." Like, oh my god, I